In the quiet town of Millbridge, Washington, the Caldwell family had always been admired. They lived in a well-kept farmhouse just outside the city, nestled among tall pine trees and open fields. Thomas Caldwell was a respected doctor with a reputation for compassion and calm under pressure. His wife, Rebecca, had once been a beloved schoolteacher before choosing to stay home with their children. Their 3 kids, Emma, Jonah, and little Avery, were polite, intelligent, and active in school and community activities. On the surface, the Caldwells seemed like the kind of family people aspired to become. But beneath their picture-perfect lives, something sinister had begun to creep into their world, quietly, slowly, and unnoticed. On October 12, 2004, Thomas didn't show up for work. His co-workers were concerned immediately. He was never late. When he didn't answer his phone or return messages, a colleague drove out to his house. The scene from outside looked normal, but when no one came to the door, the police were called. When officers entered, they stepped into a house frozen in time, but something felt wrong. Lights were on. The family car was still in the driveway. But no one answered. Then, they found the blood. The bodies were discovered in different parts of the house. Emma was found in the hallway near her room, her arms bruised from a struggle. Jonah's body was hidden in a bedroom closet, as if the killer had tried to conceal it. Avery, just 8, was still tucked in bed, her throat cut while she slept. Rebecca was found sprawled in the kitchen, her skull crushed with a blunt object. What shocked the investigators most was that Thomas was not among the dead. At first, the possibility that he had murdered his family and fled was the leading theory. But that theory fell apart when they discovered his body days later in the attic, strangled and shoved inside a wooden trunk. Now, the case took a disturbing turn. If Thomas was also a victim, who had committed this massacre? There was no sign of forced entry, no signs of robbery. A deeper investigation led police to a storage unit in a neighboring town, where they made a chilling discovery. A crate filled with personal items from the Caldwell house. Photographs, drawings of the floor plan, and a journal. The name on the rental lease was Simon Griggs, a college friend of Thomas Caldwell's who had disappeared 3 years earlier and was presumed dead. The journal revealed twisted thoughts, careful notes on the family's habits, and even details that matched the crime scene. When police re-examined the house, they found what they had missed before. A hidden crawl space connected the attic to the walls, and inside were signs someone had been living there for weeks: food wrappers, makeshift bedding, and more notes. It became clear that the killer had lived inside the Caldwell home, studying them silently, waiting for the right moment to strike. To this day, Simon Griggs has never been found. The house has been demolished, but the terror remains. Families still wonder who walks among them, and what evil might already be inside their homes, watching. The police officers who entered the Caldwell home that October morning were not prepared for what they would find. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The living room appeared untouched, a half-folded blanket still draped over the arm of the couch, a cup of coffee on the table long gone cold. But as they moved deeper into the house, signs of horror began to emerge. In the hallway leading to the bedrooms, they found the first body. Emma Caldwell, the eldest child, lay in a pool of dried blood, her eyes still open in terror. She had fought back, her hands were bruised, her nails chipped, her shirt torn. It was clear she had seen her attacker and had tried to resist. Further down the hall, the officers discovered Jonah's body. The 14-year-old had been stuffed into the closet of the spare room, his hands bound with duct tape. He had been stabbed multiple times, and the walls of the closet were smeared with blood and deep scratch marks, showing that he had struggled even while confined. The sight shook even the most seasoned investigators. But the worst discovery came next. In the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall, little Avery was found lying in her bed. Her body was undisturbed, the blankets neatly pulled up to her chest. But a single, clean cut across her throat told the officers she had never stood a chance. She had been murdered in her sleep. The scene in the kitchen was equally disturbing. Rebecca Caldwell was face down on the tile floor, her head caved in from multiple blows with what would later be identified as a fireplace poker. Blood had pooled around her body and splattered across the refrigerator and cabinets. There were no signs of a struggle in the kitchen. It was as if she had been caught off guard and attacked before she even had time to scream. The horror of the scene left the officers stunned. But one question loomed over them: Where was Thomas Caldwell? At first, investigators assumed he had committed the murders. It was the most logical conclusion. Spree killers often begin with their own families. But that theory started to unravel almost immediately. His car was still in the garage. His phone, wallet, and keys were on the kitchen table. There were no signs he had left the house. A search of the entire property finally led them to the attic, where an old trunk was found wedged into a far corner. When they opened it, the body of Thomas Caldwell was inside, strangled, his face frozen in pain. The narrative had changed entirely. Thomas wasn't the killer. He was the final victim. Whoever had done this had not only murdered a family in cold blood, but had gone to lengths to frame the father, or at least delay the discovery of their own involvement. The question was no longer who died. The question now was, who had done this, and how had they vanished without a trace? The investigation into the Caldwell family murders became the largest case Millbridge had ever seen. Dozens of officers, FBI profilers, and forensic experts were brought in. News of the brutal slaying spread quickly, and the public was gripped by fear and speculation. The fact that the killer had managed to murder 5 people in their own home and disappear without leaving a trace suggested a level of planning and patience that was deeply disturbing. It didn't look like a robbery gone wrong or a spontaneous act of violence. Whoever had done this had studied the family, waited for the right moment, and struck with calculated cruelty. Detectives began digging into the Caldwell's background. Nothing suggested trouble. No enemies. No shady business. No family disputes or dark secrets. But one detail began to stand out. Thomas Caldwell had once mentioned, years earlier, a friend from college who had suffered a breakdown. That name, Simon Griggs, had been forgotten by most. He had vanished in 2001, declared legally dead after being missing for over 2 years. But when investigators pulled his old records, they found something that made them pause. Simon Griggs had been obsessed with psychology, fascinated by isolation and control. Some professors described his behavior as deeply unsettling. And in Thomas Caldwell's college yearbooks, there were notes written by Simon, cryptic and strange, filled with phrases like silent places and the space between. The trail was cold until a detective followed a lead about an unpaid storage unit 40 miles away in Yakima. The unit had been rented under a fake name, but the ID and signature matched Simon's style from old records. Inside, police found what they didn't expect, items that had clearly come from the Caldwell home. A silver necklace that had belonged to Rebecca. A child's drawing signed by Avery. An old leather-bound journal that appeared to be full of observations, routines, even meal plans of the Caldwell family. It read like someone had been watching them for weeks, maybe months. Most disturbing of all were the photographs. Dozens of candid shots, all taken from a distance, some through windows. They showed the family in their most vulnerable moments, eating dinner, playing in the backyard, sleeping. None of them ever looking at the camera, never knowing they were being watched. The photographs were dated, and they matched the timeline leading up to the murders. It was clear now, whoever had killed the Caldwells hadn't just attacked them. They had stalked them, lived near them, and possibly even with them. As the detectives began piecing together this new angle, a horrifying theory began to emerge. The killer may have been inside the house long before the night of the murders. Hiding, listening, waiting. The possibility chilled everyone involved. There was no forced entry because there didn't need to be one. The murderer had likely slipped inside when no one noticed and never left. And if that was true, there was one terrifying question still unanswered. How many nights had the Caldwell family slept, unaware that someone was already living inside their home? With the discovery of the storage unit and its disturbing contents, investigators began to look at the Caldwell house with new eyes. What if the killer hadn't come from outside? What if he had been living inside the house the entire time, hidden in plain sight? The idea seemed absurd at first, but it explained too much: the lack of forced entry, the intimate knowledge of the family's habits, the perfectly timed attack. Forensics teams returned to the property, determined to find what they might have missed during the initial search. What they uncovered would deepen the nightmare. In the attic, tucked behind insulation and beams, they discovered a narrow crawl space. It was barely wide enough for an adult man to slide through, but it stretched along the upper wall of the house, connecting to vents, gaps, and cavities between the walls. Inside the crawl space were discarded food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a pile of clothing, none of it belonging to the Caldwell family. There were also notebooks, filled with more handwritten notes. Some were observations of the family's behavior. Others were personal reflections, dark and erratic. One entry read, "They move like clockwork. Dinner at 6:45. Lights out by 10. I know the rhythm. I am the rhythm." A hidden hatch led from the attic crawlspace down into the walls of the house. Investigators followed it and discovered that it ran all the way behind the kitchen and into the closet where Jonah's body had been found. The design of the old farmhouse, with its thick interior walls and outdated construction, had allowed for just enough space for someone thin and determined to crawl through. This was how the killer had moved, silently and invisibly, within the house. Now the timeline began to make a horrifying kind of sense. The killer had broken into the house weeks before the murders, likely at night or while the family was away. He had stashed food and supplies in the attic and began living inside the walls. From there, he had watched them. Every conversation, every argument, every laugh. He knew their routines better than they did. And when the moment was right, he struck. The physical evidence was matched against old DNA samples from Simon Griggs. Hair fibers, fingerprints on the attic hatch, and even saliva from an apple core in the crawlspace confirmed it. Simon had been in that house. He had murdered the Caldwells after hiding among them for weeks, possibly longer. But by the time authorities had pieced it all together, Simon was gone. Surveillance footage from a Greyhound bus station showed a man matching his description boarding a bus the day after the murders. The destination: somewhere near the Canadian border. After that, nothing. The community of Millbridge was shaken to its core. Parents double-checked their attics. Children refused to sleep alone. And the Caldwell house, once a symbol of warmth and family, now stood as a silent reminder of just how close true evil can get, without ever being seen. The Caldwell house was demolished exactly 1 year after the murders. No one in Millbridge wanted to live there, not even temporarily. Rumors had taken root, strange noises during the night, shadows seen moving behind closed curtains, and a persistent cold that lingered even in the summer months. Whether these stories were real or just fueled by fear didn't matter. The home was no longer a house but a monument to something too disturbing to ignore. Bulldozers came early in the morning, but even then, locals watched from a distance, whispering, avoiding eye contact with the lot where 5 people had been killed by someone who had lived inside with them. Despite a full investigation, Simon Griggs was never caught. After the murders, he vanished without a trace. He had used cash, left no digital footprints, and seemed to have planned his escape just as carefully as the killings. The trail went cold after the bus ride. Some believed he had crossed into Canada and changed his identity. Others thought he had gone into hiding in the vast wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. A few speculated he was dead, possibly by his own hand. But without a body, no one could be sure. The town of Millbridge changed after that. People locked their doors in the middle of the day. Neighbors who once trusted each other now watched from behind curtains. Children were no longer allowed to walk home alone. Even years later, the case continued to haunt the community. Every creak in the night, every unexplained sound from the attic, became a reason to panic. Home security sales spiked. A local contractor even started offering attic inspection services, because so many people became afraid someone might be hiding above them. The story of the Caldwell family was retold over and over again, each time with new twists, new imagined horrors, and more questions than answers. The FBI kept Simon Griggs on their most wanted list for nearly a decade. Tips came in, sightings from all over the country, but none ever led to anything solid. His face aged with the passing years, but fear of him never really faded. He had become something more than a man. He was a symbol of the unknown, the danger you couldn't see, the monster that might already be inside. Experts have studied the case, trying to understand Simon's motives. Some believe he felt betrayed by Thomas for a past argument, others that he had developed a twisted obsession with the family. But no one has been able to explain how someone could hide among them for so long without being noticed. The precision of it all still baffles seasoned investigators. To this day, the story of the Caldwell Massacre remains the most brutal family killing in Washington state history. And even though the house is gone, the empty lot remains untouched. No one wants to build on it. No one wants to disturb what was left behind. Because deep down, Everyone in Millbridge fears the same thing, that the shadow that once lived in the walls never really left.